Hello and welcome to your go-to Detroit Pistons podcast, the Pistons Pulse, co-hosted by me, Bryce Simon of Motor City Hoops.
And Omari Sankofa II, Pistons beat writer for the Detroit Free Press.
And of course, we're always blessed to be joined by our producer, Wes Davenport. If you are not listening to Wes and Blake Silverman over on the Pin Down on the Detroit Bad Boys YouTube channel, you absolutely should be. Of course, you should be subscribed to and reading all of O2's work over on the Detroit Free Press. And because it's completely free, you should also be subscribed to the Motor City Hoops Substack, where I have game notes and analysis after every game. O2, I had 5.5 pages of notes and analysis after this game on Monday night against the Celtics. It felt like a playoff game to me, and I took notes like it was a playoff game, and I feel like it kind of lived up to the hype, at least what I thought it might be.
Yeah, I thought it definitely did. After the game, Cade said it was just a 48-minute battle, and that's exactly what it felt like. Like it felt like there wasn't a single minute on the court where like both teams weren't giving 110%. I think it's an inherently fun matchup, not just because it's 1 versus 2, but because they're just stylistically so different. Like you've got a team that's top 2 in threes per game with the Pistons, who have been bottom 5 all season, and you have a team that's got depth, versus a team that's just got a dude playing on a different planet in Jalen Brown. Just a really fun matchup, I think, for all of those reasons. And then for a game like that to go down to the wire too, it had 9 lead changes and 14 ties, or 14 lead changes and 9 ties. I forget which one is which. But
if your Twitter would have been working, we would have that. Yeah. We would have that somewhere, but we can't go check because it wasn't.
Yeah, no, I was only on Blue Sky last night because long story short, I got locked out of my Twitter account, but I'm back now.
Stop trying to hack O2's Twitter. You're not going to get in.
Yeah, it was somebody from some country in Europe. I have no clue who. But they failed because I updated my 2-factor authentication. Update your if you don't have 2-factor authentication, like go ahead and do that, because if you don't, you might get locked out of your Twitter.
Here's the thing. None of us are as important as you, so it doesn't matter as much for us to have. Nobody's trying to break into the Motor City Hoops Twitter account. But you are a beat writer for the second best team in the NBA right now, so you are much more important.
Yeah, you say that, and then they hack Motor City Hoops. So I'm not wishing that on you. No, but just fun game overall. You mentioned playoff vibes. It absolutely had that, and then for it to go down to the wire the way it did too. That was, of all the MOK games, that was the best one by far. And it was kind of fun going on Twitter after the fact and kind of reading the comments. And everybody's like just collectively kind of freaking out over how good of a game that was.
It was awesome. It was such a good game. A couple things here. Detroit Red 1379. Good to see you guys live. Joe Brown, hello gang. Very exciting game last night. Randall Taylor caught a live show Detroit basketball. Blog Pistons, hi Omari, hi Bryce, what's up? YouTube user says he got hacked on LinkedIn. So I'm putting stuff into the ether that I shouldn't be, so I take back everything I said. Wes, go back and delete all of that. So somebody said, Ned Edwards said, I tried guessing Motor City Hoops password, but it wasn't Maxime Renault for MVP 12. No, it is not that. That is funny though. Very good. I was big Maxime Renault guy, as many listeners know. Okay.
Yeah. Sorry. I'm laughing because Wes pointed out that I said authentication. I said it twice, trying to not say authentication twice.
Oh,
I did.
Listen,
it's authentication, man. 5 syllables.
I say silly stuff all the time. I was out here saying, what is it? I'll think of the word later, but yeah, I have a lot of weird way of saying things because of
it's more so for the kids listening so that they don't go to school saying authentication. Like I don't want them to, like, I'm the journalist. I don't want them tracing that back to me. I don't want to be connected to that.
Help us teachers out. So, all right. I want to throw some stats at you in general. And yes, Herb Jones, that was one, Michael. I've Herb Jones for a long time before Herb. But there's a word I said as well. Gosh dang, I'll think of it. Okay, Detroit, O2, right now, they have the second best record in the NBA. They're one of 2 teams with a 70+ winning percentage, one of 3 teams that have won 30 games so far this year. They are second in net rating. Their defensive rating now is almost as close to Oklahoma City as it is separated from the number 3 Spurs, which I know some people are like, oh, is that no, like that is a real thing. Like that, this at one point, OKC was like 6 or 7, the defensive rating points different. And now Detroit has closed that gap and separated from 3rd, which is currently San Antonio. I looked since the beginning of the year, O2. You want to guess what the Pistons defensive rating is in the month of January, where they've played 8 games?
I'm pretty sure it's number 1.
It is guess the rating though. It's definitely number 1.
It's not like 105 or 106.
99.5. It's under 100. Wow. Under 100 in the month of January for 8 games. They have the best net rating in the NBA for the month of January.
What's crazy is that their offense has actually not been as good over the last 2 weeks, same span.
It has not been very good.
So elite. Like it's completely made up for it and then some.
25th in offensive rating in January. I was going to skip over that part and maybe save that for a little bit later whenever we wanted to be a little more negative. My point is, O2, this team is number 1 in steals per game, number 1 in blocks per game. Like all of it. This is incredible. Like they are so, and it's night in and night out. I want to get back to the Boston game. We will get back to the Boston game because I think that leads to a lot of the bigger picture conversations as well. But like, what else can we say about how good this team has been truly right now today at the halfway point?
Yeah, I mean, they've just been elite. Like you said, at this point, they're now defensively closer to OKC than they are to the Houston Rockets, who were number 3 last I checked. And like, they're almost like 4 points ahead of the Rockets in defensive rating, and they're like less than 3 points or less than 2 points behind Oklahoma City. So Oklahoma City got off to an absolutely insane start defensively. They've slid a bit, and the Pistons have just gotten better. It seems like they've gotten more confident on the defensive end. Not that they ever lacked confidence on that end, but when it's become a regular routine for Isaiah Stewart to just rise up and block 2-handed poster attempts from the opposing center, and like some of the insane stuff Ausar did last night. I mean, if you've got everybody up and down, I mean, Cade, Tobias, Duren, like all those guys, I think are playing defense at least a neutral level, and in most cases are well above that. You have Ron and Javonte Green coming off the bench, and they're like just absolutely elite at producing steals. Same with Paul Reed. It's just chaos up and down the roster. The only player you could pick on in that whole group is Duncan Robinson, and even he still finds a way to make a difference, just knowing where to be or just hustle plays here or there. With all that said, still doing it under 100 for 8 games in January is insane. I mean, like just 110 is elite in today's league. So to be under 100 is incredible.
It's Caleb says, live episode while I'm working takes away the dilemma of watching live versus waiting till I'm working. Seeing you on the all NBA pod, Bryce, way to rep the Pistons. Yeah, I had a really good conversation over there with Adam Murray's, who's hopefully I will see him in Denver whenever me and O2 get to connect. A week from today, we'll be at the Nuggets game. Blog Piston says, greetings from Spain. I am seeing, we are seeing your questions and stuff in the chat, guys, so we will definitely hit on some of those. YouTube user says, are the Pistons number 1 points in the paint? They are actually number 2.
New Orleans is number 1.
New Orleans. O2's guy, Derek Queen, holding it down over there for the Pelicans. Got here late. Greetings from SoCal. Love it. Blog Piston says, against rivals in the top 12 in January is amazing. That was the other thing I saw. Against teams above 500, they also had one of the best records in the NBA. So just a ridiculous start. Let's go back to this Celtics game because you brought up like, okay, let me ask you this. I would love to watch this in the playoffs. O2. How about you? Let's start there. Like I watched that and said, give me 7 games. Our guy, Harry or Mickey from Order of the Blazing Horse says, what up, Doe? I think it's such a contrast in style. So I had it on the Substack, the math game, right? Boston is a high 3-point attempt rate team. Detroit only lost the 3-point battle by 2 last night, Omari. The possession battle, Boston did get some offensive rebounds. Detroit didn't turn them over quite as much. But what Detroit really did was they just held down their field goal percentage. Boston was 40% from the field. Um, I'm all about seeing these teams go at it in the playoffs. I love whenever they match up and have games like we saw on Monday night.
Yeah. I mean, if this were an Eastern Conference Finals, I think everybody, save the teams who are hoping that their teams get to the Eastern Conference Finals, but just from an objective matchup standpoint, I think that would be really fun. This is the second straight. Well, I say second straight. It seems like every single Pistons Celtics game comes down to the wire. But you remember in Boston, that one also came down to the final possession. It just came down to some missed free throws at the end. Uh, they're just a fun matchup for whatever reason. It seems like they're always evenly matched, even before the Pistons kind of had this turnaround. It seemed like they had a knack for playing Boston really tough. Um, yeah, I'm surprised Boston has been as good as they've been. I do also want to say that too. They don't really have a big man rotation. Like their backup bigs, like it's nothing against them at all. Like Luka Garza, a former Piston. Like I'll never say anything about Xavier Tillman as a fellow Spartan, but like those three guys, like for them to be able to sustain any type of defense at all, and they haven't been that great defensively, to be fair, but like to even just like not be dead last, with some of the other guys we have in that lineup, it's just insane that they're number 2 in the East with that roster. Yeah, after JB, like I think Missoula is absolutely in that coach of the year discussion because it's been pretty crazy.
When we did it on Game Theory, Sam had Missoula, I had JB, obviously, as coach of the year. I think what's getting lost right now because it's sustained for so long is that what Detroit is doing is above people's expectation. And I think people are forgetting that now, that nobody had Detroit number 1 in the East. Nobody had them on a 62 win pace. And I think it's getting lost that they are exceeding people's expectations as well, just like Boston is exceeding people's expectations. Just because Boston's expectation was like play in and now they're number 2, and Detroit's was like the 5 seed and they're number 1, I don't think we should give JB less credit. What I will say to this from Blog Pistons, Missoula is a genius. Missoula is really good. And he had an out of timeout where he anticipated what JB and his staff were going to do, what set action they were going to go to, because they had been playing a smaller player on Jalen Duren and Nimi Keita on Ausar Thompson. And so they anticipated that JB would draw up a design post action for Duren. So out of the timeout, Boston actually went back to the Keita on Duren matchup to take it away. It's little things like that I think are really, really fun within a game. And you don't always get in the regular season, Omari, right? Like usually in the regular season, those type of things don't show out. It's more so for the playoffs. Let's talk about the Detroit Pistons and how good they were in this game. Who do you want to start with? I think there's a whole lot of narratives and conversations.
Yeah, let's just start with Cade. Yeah, let's just start with Cade. I mean, all-star starter.
Yeah.
Yeah, got to give, Cade, just the shout out first all-star starter for the Pistons since Allen Iverson in 2009, 17 years ago. And then he's the first Piston to make back-to-back all-star games since Chauncey Billups. So, I mean, this is kind of what you want and expect from Cade, in year 4 or 5, right? Clearly, top 10, I think at this point, player in the league. He was, I think, first in player voting, second in media voting, and fourth in fan voting. So it's just not just a popularity aspect, but the across the board respect. I think he's gotten just from the collective NBA fandom and ecosystem. He's really broken through in a way that we haven't seen a Pistons star do in a long time. And then I also thought his performance against the Celtics really highlighted why he's done so. He's still got a brace on his wrist. He just hasn't shot the ball well since that 4-day break, still dealing with that wrist contusion. But 14 assists, 0 turnovers, couple blocks, just really conducted things all the way through. He had more assists than Boston did as a team. Just speaks to just how critical he was to keeping things moving and also to their defense as well. But that's what Cade does. Like, he can just beat you in so many different ways. And I think he was only 4 of 16 or 4 of 17 from the floor, but still he can just elevate the team by finding ways to get it done.
That was the ultimate game where if you just look at the box score and you don't watch, you're just like, oh man, Cade was awful in this game. And listen, I do want to give Jaylen Brown credit. Like I thought Jaylen Brown really took that, matchup, and Jaylen Brown is having one of the best seasons in the Eastern Conference this year. But if you watch that game, and I was critical of Cade's scoring in my notes, but you could still see just like everything else that he provided. The creation, the defense. I thought his defense, I felt like he took on the defense even more so, knowing that, hey, Jaylen Brown's on the other side trying to prove this best two-way player in the NBA narrative or whatever. And I thought Cade tried to match that on the defensive end with some of his stops and the way he got, like you mentioned, blocks and stuff like that. So I thought he was really, really good. And I thought the passing was very good. He had a really fun one in transition in the first quarter where he actually jailed Luka Garza in transition, and it ended up being a lob for Jalen Duren. Usually you jail defenders out of the ball screen. Cade was able to recognize it in transition and stop Garza from getting back, putting the defense in a tough spot. I think we all know that without Cade's gravity, the Detroit offense, like whatever you want to say, whatever worries you have about the Detroit offense, it gets way worse without Cade on the floor in terms of that. I will also say that with Tobias, and we will talk about Tobias, part of why Tobias was so successful is because the lineup that Boston wants to run and Jaylen Brown taking the Cade matchup, which left more advantageous matchups for Tobias Harris to attack. I realize Derek White is an awesome defender, but there is a real size difference between Tobias Harris and Derek White. And I think because of who Cade is, that allowed Tobias to get some of the shots he did and get the matchups he did to go attack in the post. So I thought Cade, in a game where obviously he was not efficient scoring, the defense was there, the passing was there, and just the sheer gravity that he has on the court still showed up in every way.
Yeah, and I think last night you really see how big the Pistons starting lineup is
Sure.
compared to a lot of other teams. I mean, K's 6'6", Ausar 6'6" or 6'7", Tobias is 6'8", Jalen about 6'10", and then Duncan 6'7". I mean, you don't really have a smallish player in there at all. And then you see Boston, like you said, Derek White, great defender, but he's 6'4". No matter who he's going against, he's giving up at least a few inches in size and potentially weight as well. You look at Peyton Pritchard, obviously he's about 6'1". You've got Ausar on him or whoever. You can kind of overwhelm him in some ways, even though he's still such a bucket. It seems like he always has a pretty nice night against the Pistons. But Cade being able to just not only hold his own, but really give maximum effort on that end has elevated this group a lot. Like I said, the only player you can really pick on is Duncan, and Duncan is still crafty and smart enough that he makes plays anyway on that end. So you look at how dominant they've been. A lot of that does start with Cade being able to hold his own right there.
Yeah, just a really impressive performance from him. What about Tobias? Let's go to Tobias. I think that's the easy transition. I'm not going to lie, O2, I was nervous whenever I saw Tobias was getting the Jaylen Brown matchup. I do want to talk about the last possession of the game in regards to that. But ultimately, the fact that he had to take that matchup defensively and expend that energy and then have the offensive performance he ended up having with massive shots throughout the game. I mean, that's one of the best ones that I think we've seen from Tobias.
Yeah, that was probably Tobias's best game of the season. Hit big shots, took one of the toughest defensive matchup all the way to the end, and got Jaylen Brown to miss with a pretty solid contest on that last shot. One thing about Tobias I think has flown under the radar a little bit is that he's actually been a little bit more banged up this season than he has been in the past. This will be his first season, excluding that season after COVID, I think, where they played 72 games, where he won't play at least 70. And last week he talked about just needing those 4 days to get himself right, with the time off he had before too. He's had some ankle injuries. He had the hip injury against the Lakers where he left in the first quarter. So I think he's feeling a little bit healthier, and I think we're starting to see that. Tobias, when he's locked in, he can play at a truly high level, and they really needed somebody to step up and hit shots last night. Outside of Tobias, I thought J.I. had some big threes late, and then Duncan. It wasn't an amazing offensive night for the Pistons for most of the night, especially through the first 3 quarters where they were only 6 of 27 from three or something like that. They weren't really falling to the fourth. So, yeah, Tobias, like, they call him Unc, and I think everybody knows what he brings behind the scenes in the locker room too. But like last night just shows how important he is on the floor as well.
Yeah, just an incredible performance from him. And I think multiple other players that we need to talk about and discuss how they played in this game as well. We'll get into that right after this.
All right, we are back with segment 2. Unless you had any other thoughts on Tobias, we could probably let's talk about Jalen Duren. I thought last night was probably his best night of the month of January. He had 18 and 9. I thought that had some really, really strong defensive possessions, including switching on some smaller guys. He had a really nice closeout on Jaylen Brown, I thought. And then, was just dominant in the interior. I think that's what you want from him. I think he got a couple fouls on Luka Garza early. I think Luka had four fouls by halftime. Duren was a big part of that. What have you liked about Duren's not just growth, but specifically last night?
Yeah, I mean, I think that was an advantageous matchup for him. Well, I will say this: Nimi Keita is better defensively than what I realized.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't quite as advantageous, but you still want to see him, really dominate that matchups. What? I thought he was pretty good. I still really struggle with Duren in the ball screen defense, Omari. I still think he gets his hips open to the handler too much. And I would really like to see him work on that. I would like to see his hips be a little bit better in the ball screen drop and all of that. I thought he got out on an island in isolation quite a bit last night, maybe more than other games. And I thought he held up decent. Like, I thought he did okay. I don't remember a whole lot of possessions where I'm like, man, he just got cooked. Like, I'm sure there's one or two, but that was kind of interesting to me because to me, the more I watch the NBA and dive into it deeper and all of that, the more variety you can provide, the better suited you are to make a run, right? The better suited you are to win night to night in the regular season, but especially in the playoffs. And so if Duren, yeah, he's going to drop more often than not. But if there are times where Detroit can say, hey, like, all right, we just got to switch this and let him survive and live on that, that would be huge. And I know that was talked about a lot early in his career and coming out of college. I don't know that we've seen a ton of it, but that was probably the biggest thing that stood out from this particular game, along with the play finishing, right? Like 18 points on 12 field goal attempts is very, very efficient, obviously. So I thought that he did do what he needed to do scoring wise. And those points from the center position are just massive for this team right now.
Do you think he's an all-star, a deserving all-star?
So we would have to really go through it. I think it's easy to say yes, right? Like, I think it's just easy to say. So let's quickly do it. And we'll just try to get to 12. Maybe Wes, you can keep track of international and American. Well, that's where it gets tough because then.
Yeah.
But let's see where he's at if we just go 12 in the East. All right. So Cade is 1. Yes.
Yeah. Jaylen Brown.
2. Jalen Brunson is 3. Who are the starters? Giannis and Maxey.
And Maxey. Yeah.
Okay. So let's start. So that's 5. Scotty Barnes. Toronto has to have a representation.
Yeah.
If you want to argue Scotty Barnes or Brandon Ingram, like whatever. So that gives you 6. Donovan Mitchell has to be on there. I don't care that they're 7th in the East. So that's Norm 7. Powell? I don't know that I would say Norm automatically over Duren.
Yeah, I think if it's
Jalen Johnson.
Yeah, I wonder about the Hawks only because they have been sliding a bit. I'm looking at the standings. They're 5
They're
games.
10th. Here's what I'll say though. At the end of the day, Jalen Johnson, like, the numbers are still ridiculous, and he's kind of been he has been the best player, most important player, whatever, on that team. So you're at 8, and then you don't have a representative from Orlando, which maybe I don't know how that's going to play out with all the injuries. You don't have a representative from Miami. So I would say no matter who you say, that's 10. We haven't mentioned Towns. Michael Porter Jr. is actually a really interesting name. Yeah. They're 12 and 29, but he's had an incredible year. I don't know that Charlotte's going to get any individual player. I think there's a little bit more of a discussion than what people think sometimes. But I think he's right here then in the mix once you get through some of those names.
Yeah. There's always snubs. I think the reality, and it's been a reality in the NBA for at least 6-7 years in my eyes. Like there's just more talented all stars and all NBA players than could just get on the ballot. I actually think you could very fairly do a fourth all NBA team and not be having to reach to like find guys on there just because the league is so deep. It's just when you have a Pistons team that's so far ahead in the East. I mean, they're 5.5 games ahead of Boston. They've just really put ahead. Who knows where it'll be in 3 weeks by the time we get to the actual game. It just seems like historically, coaches have always favored winning to an extent. And if the Pistons are going to have, I'll put it this way: if the Pistons have 2 All-Stars, the second one is Duren. And
100%, I agree.
And I think he does. I don't know how coaches are going to vote. That's not based on any inside analysis or anything. It just seems like the league has always tried to value winning, and I think Duren does end up probably getting in either over Jalen Johnson or MPJ just because of the record. But we'll see how it goes.
I think what's hard is how do you give the Knicks 2 guys when the Pistons are 7 games above? Or if you're going to give the Knicks 2 guys, how do you not give the Pistons 2 guys? If you're going to give the Raptors Scotty Barnes and Brandon Ingram, like that, I think that's even harder to justify than Jalen Duren. You know what I mean? So like that's my thing is it's really tough to see how other teams get 2 guys and Detroit doesn't. But I know that's not always how it works. So I think he is absolutely right there. I struggle a little bit more to say it's a lock, just in terms of I know how sometimes this stuff goes. As we went through it right there, it seemed like the chance is pretty high because of their success. And it's not like it's unwarranted statistically. Like he's averaging 18 and 11, so like he's having a good season. We'll see. I don't want to say it's a lock because then I'm afraid Pistons fans will, they're going to get upset either way, and maybe rightfully so if he doesn't end up on. Another aspect of this is the international versus American component, where they could end up having to add extra players based on and injuries and all of that. So we'll see. I want to talk a little bit about Duncan Robinson. 0-2. Duncan Robinson's plus minus is yet another reason that we should not use single game plus minuses to make any sorts of argument. Duncan Robinson was a -4 in this game, and I realized it was a close game, but Duncan Robinson was not a negative in this game. Duncan Robinson was awesome in this game. Like, to me, this was the Duncan Robinson game where it wasn't just 3-point shot making, and there was that, but it was also hustle plays, would come in and tip rebounds away, stuff like that. You tweeted about the jab step 3-pointer, which was incredible, and no shade to Derek White, but the fact that he did it to somebody as good defensively as Derek White just made it better. My favorite possession was the over the head save and then sprint to the other corner and knock down a 3 from Duncan Robinson.
Yeah. Duncan's fun to watch when he's in that type of groove. Duncan Robinson has a bag. Like, let's start there. He's got some tools in his toolkit. I think last night was more so just his 3-point shooting, but like, we've seen him kind of take guys off of the dribble. Like, we've seen cutting. He doesn't turn the ball over much at all. Which you wouldn't expect him to, being a guy who's more so an off-ball shooter, but he does have the ball enough that he could be turnover prone, and he's not. He just tends to make good decisive decisions. That behind the back save, just a crazy sequence. Ausar, tries the touchdown pass downhill to him, overthrows it by probably 6 or 7 feet. Duncan just boats and just barely gets to it. Like his feet are probably 2 inches from the baseline out of bounds line, and he just kind of heaves it back. Cade catches it in between like 2 or 3 Celtics, and then Duncan just kind of drifts from the opposite baseline and it knocks down a 3. Like, the whole thing was extremely chaotic, yet the Pistons were kind of in control of it the whole time. But the main point here is that Duncan just does so much stuff for the offense that I think adds up over the course of a game. It's not just the fact that he can shoot, but it's how he gets those shots and could just consistently create things for a team that, I mean, for all of his efforts last night, he carried their 3-point effort for the most part. Like there was a point where, I think he was like 4 of 6 from 3, and the rest of the team, was shooting sub 30%. So it's just the way he gets to those 3-pointers that I think just kind of goes beyond the typical spacing and really kind of helps keep this offense afloat.
YouTube user says it perfectly. Duncan was good last night. Boston hunted him and he held up better than expected. Was he a positive defender? Probably not, but definitely a positive player by a mile. I also want to highlight this. Late in the game, Tobias Harris makes a massive 3-pointer, and it was off a Cade catch, drive, and kick. Cade created separation for that catch, drive, and kick because Duncan Robinson set a very random but great flare screen to create that initial advantage. So I ask you this, O2, who do you think leads the Detroit Pistons in screen assists this season?
I would guess Duren, virtue of his role. Yes.
Yeah. Jalen Duren is 1. Who do you think is 2?
Stu
is 2. So Duren has 91. Stu has 60. Who do you think is 3?
I would say Tobias, but I think he's missed too much time.
It is Paul Reed at 42.
Paul Reed, yeah.
The next one is 30, and then there is a massive drop to 13. Who do you think has 30 screen assists this year?
So I would guess Duncan.
It is Duncan Robinson. So if you take away the
Tobias after him,
it is actually Ausar and Cade at 13, Javonte and Tobias at 9. I mean, Tobias per minute, Tobias is probably the next. But my point here is, obviously your bigs have the most screen assists, right? Like that makes sense. But being a good screener as an elite shooter that Duncan Robinson is massive. And being able to even set screens early in offense. There was one possession where he came up and set one because he's usually guarded by the other team's worst player, right? So if he can set a good enough screen that forces the switch, now Cade Cunningham gets to attack the other team's worst player or draw the double team or whatever. So I would say Duncan's 30 screen assists probably don't even tell the full value because there's a lot that don't show up as true assists in the way they track them or score them. So I just wanted to give Duncan credit for that because I just think at the end of the day, he's so much more than just a floor spacer. And here's the other, he at least gives great effort defensively. How many times have you watched a defensive possession where you're like, man, Duncan's not paying attention? Duncan, you may be like, man, Duncan's slow, but you didn't say he wasn't trying hard, right? And I think there's something to be said for that. We'll see what it ends up in the playoffs. But through 41 games, he's been everything I thought he would be for this team. And quite frankly, Omari, maybe a little bit more.
Yeah. And let's just say last summer, again, great work by the front office for that quick pivot to Duncan. And then, I mean, to get him on the contract, they got him on too. I mean, I think his
good point.
His value to this team has exceeded that. And like beyond this season, it's going to continue to exceed that. He's been so good for this team. Like he's fit this offense like a glove. Like you said, I think just the effort he gives on defense still matters a lot because you can drag a team down, I think, more with bad effort than you can with just your defense not quite being up to snuff regardless of your effort, right? You still want to see 100% there, and he always gives that.
And I think part of that effort is he ends up in the right spot, which to your point, if you're not even in the right spot as the low man or the gap defender or in transition, like that can really, really disrupt your defense overall. They can scheme some things to occasionally help him out in terms of his issues staying in front of the ball. All right, I want to talk about Ausar Thompson because then I think everybody else plays into a bigger picture conversation that we probably are going to have or lead into having. Thoughts on Ausar Thompson last night, and maybe not just last night, but just kind of in general where he's at this season. Maybe a little bit of an Ausar check-in here.
Yeah, I mean, defensively, he's terrific. For all the reasons we've always talked about with him, like 4 steals, I believe, last night. He was just like everywhere, creating havoc. Just his ability to essentially switch on it to say it to anybody and more than hold his own. I mean, just everything he does uh, on the defensive end is amazing, and why he's been an effective starter for this team. Offensively, it's been more of a mixed bag. I think ideally on some level this season, you want to see some growth as a shooter, and it's probably been the opposite, where he just doesn't really take threes much at all. And a lot of times when he does take them, it's just because of possession kind of fizzled out, and it just kind of ends up in his hands, and it's a heave. I still think he's when he has the ball and he's aggressive with the ball, I think it does a lot of great things for the offense. Uh, it feels like there are nights where he like there's flow, and he's finding gaps to attack, and then there's nights where he's figuring out where exactly he needs to be. I thought he was good on both ends last night, particularly on defense. Just the havoc he created there. Big reason why they held Boston, I think, was just below 40%. They were like 39.8 or something like that.
He's a first team all defensive guy right now.
Yeah.
For me, we did that over on Game Theory, and he landed as a first team all defense guy for both Sam and I. Stu actually wasn't eligible yet because there's still enough percentage of his games under 20 minutes. We'll see how that plays out the rest of the year. I want to throw something at you, Wes. I would love to get your thoughts in the chat as well, and obviously from our live viewers. I think I'm good with the Ausar on the ball stuff for the rest of this season. And I wonder if it would be better for him to just lean into fully off the ball, like just lean into run out in transition, play on the baseline, ball screen and roll. And here's where this idea comes from. And I don't mean to compare him to his brother, like they're different players, all of that. When I watch the Rockets play, almost every game I've watched, my note says, Amin might be the most elite baseline cutter, play finisher, offensive rebounder, etc. Amin doesn't shoot threes. He shoots them better than Ausar, but it's not like he's a floor spacer, and he figures it out. Houston, has some floor spacing questions, maybe not to the extent Detroit has, but like, I was all about like, let's play Ausar on the ball, put the ball in his hands, let him try these things. We are halfway into the season. I don't know that we've seen it be extremely fruitful. And I do wonder now if the plan should be, let's put him in the dunker. Let's put him in the corner to cut backside. Let's put him in the dunker to get an offensive rebound. Let's use him in the ball screen short roll to go finish or throw the lob to Duren or whatever. What are your thoughts on that, O2? Like, are we far enough into the season now where it's like, maybe let's go put him in a role where he can thrive, and then we can get back to the other stuff, next offseason and into next year? Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think, well, one, I think I agree. I feel like early in the season, we saw a lot of stuff we liked from Ausar with the ball in his hands, and I just feel like as the Pistons have had more guys come back, who are going to have the ball in their hands in some capacity, feels like Ausar has been lost in the mix a bit, as far as what he should do when he has it. And he's a great off-ball cutter. I think the goal is that you just don't want defenses to ignore him. You want them to have to account for him at all times, and there are strengths that he can lean into.
Can I touch on that real quick before you finish?
Sure.
My argument to that is, I think that's why I want this to happen, is so he can start to figure those out, right? Because there are ways for him to counter. So let's say they put their worst defender on him, right? Because we're just going to ignore him. Well, then Ausar should have 5 offensive rebounds in that game. Or I think one of the underrated things that players haven't taken from Draymond Green, I'm sorry, people, I know people hate Draymond Green sometimes, is the catch and immediate into a dribble handoff or something like that. I guess what you're saying there is kind of my point, O2, is let's put him in that role so he and they can start figuring it out, because it doesn't look like putting the ball in his hands more is the answer to, well, he doesn't shoot it very well, so we'll let him play in that role. Does that make sense? No. I think he can figure it out, I guess.
Yeah, no, I think he can figure it out. I think the other issue you kind of run into with that is that there's overlap with that role and what Duren,
That's
is
fair.
doing
This
for
is
them
fair. Sure.
as well. I think when you have Stu out there, it alleviates that a bit just because Stu can knock down threes. But you know, not to get into the what they need to do at the long term for this and that, but you imagine Asar next to that elite kind of high volume, high accuracy, four, and then it's easier to imagine Asar in that row, just because the court's going to be so much more open. They don't quite have that now, even though Tobias, is a very, very capable shooter. Just because you have Duren and like Duren is such a big part of this offense. So that's the issue with I think that role for Asar, it can work, but you're going to have two guys with a bit of overlap there, and I think you're just always going to have a little bit of awkwardness in the offense with that.
Wes said agreed on both counts. Just anything to up the efficiency for him without asking him to do much. His defense is so good. You don't need much to justify the minutes. A sentence I never imagined typing: take Asar's on-ball reps and give them to Jalen Duren. He says not point guard stuff, to be clear. Yes, like just the ability to attack and what Jalen Duren has shown in those situations. Okay, I just wanted to throw it out there. It's been something I've been thinking about. We'll see, if this team looks different after the deadline, then which is quickly approaching. All of a sudden, we're like, are we 2 weeks away? Is that what it is? 2 weeks, right? The 4th or something? Is it Tuesday?
Yeah, we're like
the
2 weeks
5th.
away.
So it'd be Wednesday.
Yeah. It would be on Wednesday. Yeah.
2 weeks from tomorrow. That's crazy. All right, let's go to break. And then O2, we had a super chat that was here even before we showed up, which was cool. Like I was setting last hour and I just wanted to make sure the chat was open. It's like, yep, chat is open. Already made a little money here. Actually, I don't even know where the money goes, so that doesn't make any sense. But we do have a super chat. Hopefully it goes to Robin. Robin or Wes are the ones that deserve the money. Start with that, and then I think that'll lead us into a lot of the other conversations. So we'll get with that right after this.
All right. We're back with segment 3. And
we have the best usernames because our guy at YouTube user, and then this one is pretty funny as well. So appreciate all of these.
At insert clever username 993, $5 Canadian. Thank you.
Is that what that means? Okay, let's go. Canada. We're representing all over the world today. I love it.
Yeah, shout out Canada. Why does JB not close games for Stu on the floor, not having him or Sar guarding Jaylen Brown on the final possession of this bad process? I think that's a fair, question. Like, why not have your best defender on the floor when you just need a defensive stop? Same for Stu. I think the reason for that is because you could not have them out there, and I think this team is good enough to still have a good enough baseline. Defensively to maybe live with the trade-off, and then things kind of get knocked off course, whatever, in that last possession. You have guys that could shoot, generate a little bit more downhill gravity, whatever it may be. But I think they still would have won last night's game if they had Stu and Asar on the floor. I don't know if they played better with them not being on the floor. What I'm getting at really is I think this team is deep enough that it's okay to not have those guys on the floor. And I think in every scenario, especially if the results are what you wanted them to be, and for a team that's 31-10, did get the stop on the last possession. I think it shows that this team has the depth that always have to lean on those guys. But I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that, Bryce.
First, thank you for the super chat. Truly, we appreciate it. The part that I definitely agree with there was I did not agree with JB not having Asar on Jaylen Brown on the last possession, at least. That scenario, and that was a very, very specific scenario. And this is another one of those situations. Like, I would love to have access to JB, not to just to truly understand, just as a basketball mind. Like, JB obviously knows a million times more about hoops than me, but just ask okay, JB, what went into the thought process? Why no Asar on Jaylen Brown? I think I can understand it, why it wasn't throughout the game. You need Asar to chase Peyton Pritchard and different things like that. And so my question would be did they not trust Asar to stay down? Like, is there something in Jaylen Brown's specific offensive game that they think he could have taken advantage of Ausar with a shot fake or something like that? And Tobias maybe be better at staying down? Is it because of the respect they had for a Peyton Pritchard and they felt like Ausar was the best option to guard him and they had enough confidence in Tobias to take, Jaylen Brown away? It would be fun things to just hear his answers and talk to him about, because I am genuinely curious, because I did have the same thought of like, you know who else? I was like, why is Ron Holland not on the floor right now? Like, I think Ron Holland has been awesome defensively this year. Now, in that specific situation, you're trying to execute very specific things. It's not quite as much like, hey, the chaos. I think Ron's been good, just like being solid though, O2, don't you? Like, and I'm not saying I want Ron on Jaylen Brown, but I think Ron could have been on the court somewhere. But to your point, am I going to argue with some of the guys that were on the court? It's hard for me to do that as long as it's not Duncan Robinson. And listen, this is not Jaden Ivey hate, but Jaden Ivey's probably the next worst defender after Duncan Robinson. As long as it's not those two guys in a defense-only situation, I have a hard time critiquing too much. You know what I mean? So I have a hard time being too upset about it, I guess.
Yeah, like that's kind of where I'm at. I'm not too upset about it. Like I know Javonte Green kind of came in on that last possession, and I mean he's a great defender. I think really good, specifically at contesting the perimeter. So that made sense. Yeah, like I think I would be curious, to know kind of the specifics or some of those decisions for JB. But when you win, like that's not, like that's how it's going to be a question.
Should I bring it up in Denver whenever I see him? O2? Should I be like,
I think JB? That is.
No, I'm definitely not doing that.
No, so here's the thing: if you were going to go to a practice, I think that is a great practice question. Not necessarily like, hey, like after a game, just like, hey, you should have did this. It's more so the next day at a practice. I would say what kind of goes into those decisions, right? Like, why would you favor maybe a Javonte Green or whoever else? Like, is it something you're looking for from a discipline standpoint or just specific matchups? Like I think that's not the best in the game question after a win, but for practice, I think you would get a very insightful response. So maybe that's
hey JB, you're preparing for Jamal Murray tonight. But hey, can we go back to a week ago when you played the Celtics? And no, yeah. I never have the guts to ask a question anyway, so I just sit there and smile. Wes says maybe the answer is just that Tobias had been guarding him all night, front row seat to his tricks for 30 minutes. That's fair. And then YouTube user JB's playing 4D chess, and Ausar will lock Brown down for 40 minutes in the playoffs when it matters most. Maybe. So I don't know. I think it's a fair question from the super chat, and I do think it was fun to talk about. Sharon Dalton, good win last night. My question to you guys: why does JB continue to bring Karras out to play instead of Jenkins, who I feel is a better facilitator and create his own offense? Listen, I think we all agree here that JB has been awesome. So I want to be clear there, because it's like two questions in a row where we're questioning some things. JB deserves all the credit for me. And whenever I went on that All NBA podcast the other day, first thing I brought up was the way he changed the culture of this organization after a just disastrous season. But when you're winning, these are the kind of conversations you do start to get into. And whenever Trajan Langdon hands you 15 players that can play, 14 players that can play rotation minutes, Wes, double check me on that. No Clintman, no Isaac Jones. Is there somebody else that can't play? 15 rostered guys plus Jenkins would be 16. Are those the only two that we wouldn't trust to play minutes? Clintman and Isaac Jones?
Yeah, I think that's fair to say.
Is that fair? So 14. Yeah. When you hand a coach 14 players that he can conceivably play.
So Wendell Moore maybe is on.
Wendell. Okay. He's not a two-way though, is he? He's a two-way.
He is a two-way, yeah.
So there's 15 rostered players plus Jenkins on a two-way, 16. And all you're taking away is Jones and Clintman.
Yeah.
Anyway, when you hand him multiple players he can play, this stuff comes up. I will be honest, my guy Harry and Mickey, those guys brought me over on the Order of the Blazing Horse. They asked me for my playoff rotation. I've been a little bit more LeVert supporter. I won't lie. After the first half, I was interested in Jenkins minutes for the second half. I'm starting to swing. Here's what I will say about LeVert real quick, and I'll let you go too. I don't think LeVert's defense has been as bad as what the fan base thinks. I think his defense has actually been fine to good. I thought he made multiple impactful defensive plays last night. I understand the fan base's frustrations with his offense and why they call for some Dennis Jenkins minutes.
Yeah, I think defensively he's held up fine. I think he has a tendency to come up with impactful plays and the 15 to 20 minutes he's out there every night. I also think Dennis has been good enough that it's normal and natural to kind of clamor for him to play more. Even not over Dennis. I mean, I think I'm being over Karras. I think there's other guys. That Dennis has been just as impactful in this season. Some of that I think is just the simple fact that they've continued to win games with Karras. I think I know thoughts for the fans. They say, well, Karras he had a turnover here or there or whatnot. I think in the grand scheme of the game, he does a lot of positive things, and maybe his negative plays can stand out more. But I have not seen him as a negative for this team. He's a guy that's knocked down threes for him. Secondary playmaker. Like we said, defensively, he's held up. So some of it is just somebody's going to get the short end of the stick when you have a rotation that's deep. Karras is a vet. He's a guy that is familiar with JB, his system. You got to draw a line somewhere. I think JB still tries to find opportunities for Dennis because he does deserve to play. But the reality is that you have to draw a line somewhere, and they are still winning games with Karras. And I think that's just a fact. I don't think Karras is. I can't point to a loss where I'm like, oh, they lost that game because of Karras, right? Like, I think he's been a viable rotation piece for this team.
Yeah, and as Michael says, it's a long season. Everyone's going to play. So we'll see how it plays out moving forward. So, Wes, it's Chaz Lanier would be the other guy that you're probably not comfortable in a rotation right now. So it's 13 guys. I think there's 13 guys that we've seen, make a difference in the regular season that you could feel like, hey, if this guy's in the rotation tonight on a, random night, it's like, hey, yeah, we feel comfortable with that. Okay, we got to get through these a little bit quicker. Blog Pistons. I feel the most correct in the long term, if you want to give assets, would be Trey Murphy. This was trade potential because his contract would give us a lot of margin in salaries. Do you think 3 first rounds would be enough for Trey Murphy the third? I don't know. I don't think it gets it done. O2 based. I don't have intel, but just conversations I have and listen to. I don't know that 3. I don't know that 3 gets it done, man.
Trey Murphy is playing extremely well on an extremely good contract that just kicked in. Do you give that up for 3 picks between 25 and 30? Like, I don't think so. And I don't think from an asset standpoint, there is a deal the Pistons would put together to interest New Orleans enough to want to do it, that fans would also be like, oh, yeah, we need to do that because it would take something to get him. So, no, I don't think that's enough for Trey Murphy.
And as Michael says, if I'm Weaver, I demand Stewart or Ausar,
exactly.
plus first round pick. Like, there's also somebody has to go out in the trade. You know what I mean? So, I just, as I brought up Trey Murphy, Lauri Markkanen, Jaren Jackson, like as those deals have been presented to me by other people, I often find myself hesitating to say yes. You know what I mean? So I've kind of resigned to the fact that I'll wait for Trajan to make the big move and then I'll just analyze it there, or continue to feel like he probably just makes a smaller move with the TPE or something like that. So listen, I don't think Lowry's contract is horrible, but to your point, and I think Wes has made this point with Jaren Jackson Jr., like those contracts are massive. And so like that is a huge part. Like I'm not giving up a bunch of assets along with having to take on that money. And then I have to figure out paying Jalen Duren, and I have to figure out paying Ausar Thompson and all of that stuff. Random thought I had earlier, but Bryce, if the Pistons keep the 1 seed, you should wear a big Ben Fro all day at school and on the pod. If somebody sends me a big Ben Fro, I will wear it on the pod. My students will not understand it at school. So that would be a waste of my time. these kids don't know who Big Ben is, guys. So, but I would wear it on the pod. I think I would be willing to do that. So
I think that's a good idea.
You think so? Are you going to wear it too?
You
have to be more.
I'll just take my braids out. I'll just take my braids out, and
I've been waiting, man.
Afro,
I like your hair whenever the braids are out, man. You haven't done it.
It's just a convenience thing. The big hair is inconvenient. Like when it's braided, it's just braided. I don't have to think about it, worry about it. But
Will 313J, great show, guys. How did Sasser lose minutes immediately after that one great game? Why not Chaz over LeVert? I don't know. I don't think Chaz is probably going to get there. I realize that the jumper is real and all of that. I think with all of the other names, I just don't think Sasser's is interesting because he did have a massive game. This is where, to me, where JB's job is the hardest, like deciding this stuff night in, night out within a game. And I think why when he gets to the playoffs, his job becomes even more difficult. So, I don't think they're easy decisions, and I'm not saying people are saying they are, but he's depth is great, but then you have to push the right buttons and make the right decisions with it.
Yeah. I mean, the reality, just going back to Dennis, is that you can't play everybody. So, whether it's Sass, Dennis, Chaz, whoever it may be, they can't play everybody. Like, that's all it boils down to. They tried the 12, 13-man rotation thing. I think it's just not enough minutes for guys to really get into a rhythm, so now they're back to more, 9 to 10, maybe 11 some nights, but you can't play everybody. That's all.
Who gets forgotten is Paul Reed. Like,
yeah, Paul Reed.
Paul Reed has been awesome in his minutes, and nobody gets mad when he doesn't play. And partially that's because it's Duren and Stu playing over him. But I'm like, that dude deserves minutes just as much as a lot of these other names. So, all right, yeah. We do got to get through these. I got my son's practice here in a little bit. Do we have the better Thompson twin? Guys, I love Ausar. Amin Thompson is better right now. Who knows where it goes? I'm not saying it'll always be that way. Amin Thompson, every time I've watched a Rockets game, I've immediately thought that Amin Thompson is better than Ausar. It's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. Doesn't mean it can't change. Amin is better to me. O2, any thoughts?
I'm going to plead the fifth. They're both good.
They're both awesome. They ask us a question. Do we have the better one? Ausar I would listen to Ausar is better defensively. I think there's a case for that. But anyway, listen, you got to see these guys every day. I don't. I have to see him once. Hopefully Ausar doesn't punch me in the face. In Wesley 13, I have no reason to believe that Ausar would react that way. I'm sure he's an incredible person. Can you run off-ball screens for Ausar to get him cuts or catches 10 to 12 feet from the hoop with an open runway? I like his decision-making more as a connective piece rather than primary ball handler. Yes, and yes. Please do this. This would be awesome. And this is why I like using him as a ball screener.
Yeah, I agree. I think he is a great playmaker when he doesn't have to pound the ball per se. It's just more so quick, decisive decisions, immediate read, the driving kick, whatever it may be, dump off. I like Ausar on that role.
This is a fair point. Amin also hasn't been injured in his career, and developmental path has been different for those two players. So that's a fair point. Steven Suggs, the simple fact is the Pistons need to do a 2-for-1 trade because of the excess of players that deserve minutes, and long favorite players may need to be traded. I mean, I was thinking about this today. Everybody wants Dennis on the 15, and they want to use the trade exception. Well, that's too many players. You only have Isaac Jones as a guy that can go out, right? Like that's I don't think you're getting off of Clintman's contract. Obviously not Chaz, Sass, but I mean, we broke all of this down in terms of the use of the TPE, but if Jenkins takes a roster spot, which that decision is quickly approaching, as Keith Smith let us know, then, and when I say decision, meaning like it has to be made because he's almost used up his 50, then like somebody's going to have to move. I realize LeVert is everybody's easiest answer. Like I'm fine with that. And, his contract makes that fairly easy as well, but I don't know. We'll see. It's I'm excited for the deadline for the NBA in general, O2, but also I'm interested to see where Trajan goes with this thing.
Yeah. I think there's clamor from the fans for sure. To go for not even a big swing, but just a big enough swing that it gives you a little bit of extra oomph going into the playoffs. Whether that's MPJ, I highly doubt they do a big swing for like a Markkinen or a Trey Murphy. MPJ is probably more so in that soft spot of not up to committing too much money going forward, and maybe not as high of a buy-in to get them. But beyond that, probably a good time to use the TPE, 14.3 million. I wrote a story about this the other week, but there are some pretty good guys in that range. Uh, I think most would agree that they need to make some type of move. I don't think they need to make a move just to consolidate the roster or anything like that. I don't think that's a priority. Just get some more shooting, or depth at the floor, or whatever it may be. But they do need to do something. Before this deadline on, what is it, February 5th, 7th?
February 5th. Yep.
5th. Yeah.
I stand that we'll probably be back on Monday next week, guys. So we'll have another episode before the deadline, obviously. But I still like floor spacing. Go get a 3-point shooter. Even if it's a guy that just, it's 24 minutes of Duncan Robinson, 24 minutes of this guy, they can share the floor in offense only situations or whatever. You're one poor, cold shooting series of Duncan Robinson away from being in real trouble, I think. So yeah, we'll see. So that's where I'm at. That's what I think they end up doing. We will be back on Monday. And then, like I say, O2 and I will be there in person. I will be there in person. O2 is always there in person, but get to see him in Denver for the game on Tuesday. So excited for that. See them in person. I told my wife the other day, O2, I'm coming to a playoff game. So
okay.
Obviously, I don't have like tickets booked or hotels or whatever. Honestly, what's crazy? This is how far the Pistons have come. I'm like, okay, I can probably only make one trip. Do I like anticipate them winning the first round and then like try to come up for the second round? Do I wait for like the Eastern Conference final? Like what is my game plan here? But those are tomorrow's problems. But I told her I'm making the trek out. I haven't been to Detroit in a couple years now. I miss it. We love the city. I miss being there and seeing the NBA finals, Bryce. There you go. Maybe I'll come back a second time if they make the finals. I don't know how much harder credentials are hard to get for the finals, but anyway, so I'm excited for that. I'm excited to see you Bryce here in a week. Yeah, playoff Bryce. But thank you for everybody joining us. As always, we appreciate you. We'll be back on Monday, I think, based on how the schedule plays out. So take it away, O2.
Yeah, big thanks to our audio producer, Robin Chen, our editor-in-chief, Nicole Avery Nichols. A big shout out to West Davenport, as always, and we'll talk to you all next week.